the Sanats and the Tanaha and the Silts. Thank you. Grateful to be on these lands, and also so grateful for the warm welcome from like-minded folks. As I told Todd, I wanted to be here because there's incredible organizing happening, really values-aligned organizing, and I wanted to honor that work that's happening, and so I'm grateful for the warm welcome. For those of you who don't know who I am and sort of saw us pop into this leadership race out of nowhere, I'll just give you a bit of background about the work that I do and why I think it's the moment now for us to engage with these systems of power and bring a different set of values to them. I started climate justice organizing when I was in school. I've always had a sort of inclination towards activism. I was drawn more towards human rights issues when I was younger, but when I got to college is when I realized that climate justice is the ultimate human rights issue, and it is not just about protecting the environment. It's not just an environmental issue as so many sort of try to box it in as. It's fundamentally about our relationship with each other, and with the land, and with our economy. It's an economy, land, society issue, and as such, I'm not a one-issue candidate coming into this race. And so I think that's the story that we're here to tell. We're here to tell the story of climate justice and how to actually achieve climate justice, we need to change everything and to understand how all our systems are interrelated and connected to each other. So in my early career, I got into climate justice through an international lens. I started working with an international coalition that was influencing and working with governments in the UN climate process. And the UN climate process has been going since I was a baby. It's been going since the early 90s, 1992. And that process has been the sort of the global negotiations to achieve stabilization of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. And it's been 30 plus years, and we haven't achieved that. And I had a front row seat to that for many years at the UN. I got to see exactly who was holding up progress, where progress was being blocked, and where power showed its darkest face and wanted climate change to accelerate and to keep going. And so that kind of, I won't say I got jaded from that, but my early career at the UN really taught me about the nature of power, and it reinforced my belief that it's not just governments, but it's social movements that have the power to push back against the interests that want to keep us barreling towards climate destruction and towards climate breakdown. And so after that work, which was very international and focusing on developing countries and the global south, I really wanted to come back and root down in BC, where I grew up. And so the rest of my career has been in climate advocacy, and I've worked with a number of organizations, and alongside that with a number of the amazing, mostly Indigenous-led social movements that have opposed fossil fuel infrastructure across this province, and opposed mega projects, and opposed basically dirty business as usual. And so I've been a part of these iconic BC fights against the TMX pipeline through all its stages, and was part of the amazing victory against the Northern Enbridge, the Northern Gateway pipeline up north, and the other victory against the LNG plant in Prince Rupert. And we've had a lot of losses along the way, but we've also had these amazing victories, and it's showed me that the power of our movement is absolutely necessary as the moral compass of this critical time that we're in. And so I never thought that I would have a role in electoral politics. I always thought that I was best served supporting and building up our movements outside of the electoral system. But last year, that changed very suddenly for me when BC was hit with a string of climate disasters that turned us into sort of the bellwether for the rest of the world. We had a heat dome that killed over 600 people. We had an unprecedented wildfire season, and then we had these atmospheric rivers that put farmlands and thousands of farm animals underwater. And I was actually at the UN conference later that year in a global setting once again, and people were talking about BC from all over the world. BC was the topic of conversation because it was sort of this stark illustration of how climate breakdown has begun and accelerated, and no place in the world is safe from it, as we all know. And so last year I decided to run in the federal election. In a very sort of last minute way, and what we learned from that election, we got very close to winning, and it was a very grassroots groundswell that rose up. Activists and organizers that I'd worked with for over a decade came together to make that campaign incredibly momentous. It had so much momentum and so much energy and so much clarity to it. And I realized that we're in a moment where parties don't have enough power on their own. Movements don't have enough power on their own. We have to intersect with these systems of power, and we have to push them to be better. That campaign was a really important moment for me to say, no, we need to bring in a new generation of politicians who understand the moment that we're in, who aren't swayed by private interests, and who know what needs to be done in this moment. And so, and I'm just part of that wave. There are insurgent campaigns happening across the world right now, especially across North America, and I hope here in BC in the next provincial election. That wave has already begun, and it cannot be stopped. And so when this came up, when there were whispers of John Horgan stepping down, there were a lot of knocks on my door to step into this position. And I got a lot of calls from folks in the movement. And the moment of choice happened when I was up on Wet'suwet'en and Gitxsan territories up in northern BC at the end of July at a Peace and Unity Summit that they were hosting. And these hereditary chiefs opened this summit in a way that was so different. They said that for the first day of this conference, we're not going to do any work. You're going to go out onto the land and spend the day on the land. And we're going to put you on a raft. And we're going to raft you down the Wedzin River for an entire day. No programming, no time slots and having to rush from one place to another. You're just going to raft down this river for like 14 hours and then stop and pick berries and learn about the historical sites that you're crossing. And that Wedzin River is one of the last rivers that you can just drink out of. It's so pure. And so we're rafting down this river and just putting our water bottles in and drinking straight from the river, and the river became a part of us. And that was a really visceral experience because that's the same river that the CGL pipeline is going to be drilled under. That ecosystem is under imminent threat, as are so many systems across BC right now. And I sat down with some of those land defenders up north, and I sat down with a bunch of climate groups across the province, and we realized that we need to enter this leadership race because we need to draw a line in the sand that the status quo is not working. We need real climate action now. I'm glad you agree. We need real climate action now, and it needs to look a few specific ways. It needs to look like a reprioritization of our economy. Number one, we have been giving billions of dollars of public money to private interests where that money is not being reinvested back into people or the planet, and that money is going into infrastructure that's locking us into more emissions and climate devastation for years to come. And we need to take that money and reinvest it back in people and the planet. The framework that I'm entering this campaign with is one of people's health and well-being and planetary health and well-being above all. And so what that looks like is tackling the major issues in our province. You know, we have all these intersecting crises. We have a housing crisis, we have a poison drug supply crisis, we have an old growth logging crisis, we have a healthcare crisis, and we have public sector workers on strike, and we have all these public systems that are cracking under the strain of underinvestment and of the government not investing in people's health and well-being. And so we need to reinvest in those public systems and build them up so that when climate disasters hit, as they inevitably will, even if we stop our emissions today, so that we can be resilient to those and so that we can make sure our most vulnerable don't fall through the cracks like they did last year during the heat dome event. During the heat dome event last year, 600 people passed away, and the vast majority of them, 97% of them, were seniors, some of the most vulnerable in our society. And also the vast majority of them passed away inside their homes, which is different from any other disaster that we've had in Canadian history, where the vast majority of people were dying in their homes, which showed that these homes were inadequate for the crisis ahead. And so we need a deep investment in all of the things that make life a good life, a comfortable life, or a climate resilient life for people. We need to stop giving subsidies to the fossil fuel industry and reinvest that money back in the public good. We need to stop logging our last precious old growth. We need to cancel or so on the topic of mega projects and fossil fuel infrastructure, we need to cancel the fossil fuel infrastructure projects that are locking us into this way of being for years to come. And for projects that are so huge, that have been such a huge cost to the public, like Site C, we need to first of all have a massive public conversation about those. When the government makes major decisions like investing billions of dollars of public money into a big piece of infrastructure like that, you know, erasing 10,000 years of Indigenous culture and history, creating ecological and geological nightmares, and creating electricity that's actually still the most expensive electricity in North America, we need to have a public conversation about that. We need a referendum on Site C. We need transparency about how much these projects are costing us as people.
Right.
And it's not going to be easy. You know, I'm not here to say that there are silver bullets to canceling major projects, to putting a moratorium on old growth logging, and to dropping our emissions in line with our climate emissions targets. There's no silver bullet solution, but what we need is a collective public conversation and a shifting of our values so that it's people and the planet first. And our budgets tell a story. The budgets tell the story of where our priorities are, and we need to turn those priorities around. The last thing I'll say is that one way of thinking about the last 2 years of crisis and difficulty for so many people here, I look at the pandemic as a test of our systems, a test of our leadership, and there were clear winners and losers from that test. The winners were the corporations that experienced their highest year of profits in Canadian history. And not just gross profits, but profit margins. The profit margins of publicly traded Canadian corporations and international corporations operating here jumped during 2021, the depth of the crisis. And that is a clear indication that private interests were able to benefit from a time of crisis, at a time when people were experiencing so much devastation and difficulty in their lives, where things were unaffordable, where food was too expensive for many to afford, where so many of us were left without housing and our healthcare systems were unraveling. And so it was clear who won from the test of the pandemic and who lost. And to me, that was the litmus test that we need to completely reverse our priorities and invest in health and well-being above all. That to me is climate justice. That's the story that I'm here to tell in this campaign. I hope we can all tell it together. I hope that we can clearly articulate a vision for the province that's rooted in health and well-being, which means tackling the climate emergency at scale, as if it's an emergency, which it is. And so in terms of our policy development process, what I'm really excited, this is the last thing I will say. What I'm really excited about is developing the policy platform for this campaign is going to look like a grassroots collaborative effort. And so actually today, by the end of the day, there's going to be a page up on the website where anybody can input into the policy development process, and we're doing a series of listening circles and consultations with grassroots organizations and groups and movements so that we can build this platform from the ground up, because we know that the solutions lie in community. But overall, the framing is health and well-being first, and tackling the climate emergency at scale. So I hope that we're all in this together. I'm so glad for the warm welcome. I look forward to being on the campaign trail. And thank you so much for welcoming me here. Yeah, fish farms are part of. So are we going into Q&A now?
Yeah, I was gonna. Sorry. Awesome. Thank you so much. What a in a time of overlapping crises and despair and everything you talked about, this is such an exciting and inspiring vision for a future that can be better for everybody. So thank you for being so eloquent with that. So folks, we're going to do about 10 or 15 minutes of Q&A, and so we have a couple of requests. One is that we'll just do one question per person so that we can pass the mic around, and that we keep it in a timely fashion so that we can respect everybody's time here. So if folks have a question for Anjali, yeah, over here we got James.
Hi, thanks for being here. I got to challenge David Eby on his housing positions. I organize with the Nelson Tenants Union, and I like what I hear from your campaign. And I've seen you've been supporting the BCGEU in their strikes. Hell yeah! And so I'm curious, where in the campaign stands collective bargaining rights for tenants? That's pretty much it.
Yeah, I think one thing that's a really important piece of the housing approach, and again, details are for that collaborative process, but a really important piece that's being left out of the conversation right now is demand side measures and things like vacancy control and bargaining rights for basically tenants' rights that are often left out of this conversation about the housing crisis, because we do desperately need an immediate supply of housing. There are simply not enough homes for the people in the province, and the province has grown so much, but those homes can't happen at the cost of tenants' rights, and that supply shouldn't be something that benefits the largest corporations and the largest developers. Housing is not a commodity. Housing is a human right. That's what I believe, and that's the basis of the housing platform, the housing part of the platform, and so it's that approach essentially, that housing is a human right, and our housing market shouldn't be this free for all where people are playing with homes as investments and commodities and things that you can drive up the price of and flip and play around with, because those are people's lives. And so it's a strong supply side, but also a very strong demand side. I believe in vacancy control and tenants' rights.
Hi, I'm Dave Gregory. I'd like to ask you a question that I asked David Eby, and I didn't really get a straight answer from him. It's about fracking, about natural gas. As you probably know, at least 3/4 of our natural gas comes from the Peace region, and those sites there are fracked sites, and of course fracking produces methane and so on and so on. We know all the problems with fracking. So my question is, do you have a plan to actually progressively reduce the province's dependence on our own homes, because we have gas furnaces, on those fracked wells? Do you have an actual practical program for how one can reduce that? Because the last thing I heard Horgan say was he wanted to actually expand fracking in that area. So please give us your perspective on that.
Right. I think it's a real unfortunate misleading of the public to have framed LNG as a bridge fuel or any kind of cleaner fuel. It's not. It's still a fossil fuel, and it's still taking us further and further away from what climate action needs to look like in this province. And so the baseline demand on the climate side of this campaign is an immediate managed decline of the fossil fuel industry that puts workers first. And so what that actually entails is a major public investment in a jobs training program, in a transition program to retrain workers into green jobs and to wind down the fossil fuel industry. So the money for that deep investment that will require comes from a wind down of the subsidies of the fossil fuel industry. We've given well over $1 billion, I think it's 1.4 billion, just in the last year and a half alone to oil and gas. And that money needs to be reinvested in the jobs transition. And the only thing stopping that from happening is political will right now. There's no other reason why we can't begin that transition. There will be legal penalties. There has to be transparency about that to the public. It's going to cost us money to get out of this mess, but we have to be transparent and honest with people about that. And then in terms of reducing our dependency on gas, FortisBC is still linking 1,000 new homes every year to natural gas, and which means that you're essentially handing those homeowners a $30,000 bill for when they have to eventually retrofit later down the road anyway. And so the first thing we need to do is stop linking new homes to gas, and this is where we see the systems intersecting, because our approach to winding down gas has to be tied in with our approach to housing and building new housing. One thing that is a proposal that's on the table, and we'll see it in the policy development process, is a program for massive scaling up of heat pumps, and placing in heat pumps in homes, accompanied by a training program, an actually very cost-effective training program to create a bunch of new jobs in heat pump building and installing and managing. There's so much potential there for not very much cost, and this is just an area that hasn't been explored because the fossil fuel lobby is so strong. Decision makers are hearing from the fossil fuel industry up to 30 times more than they're hearing from other parts of the public, and that's a huge issue. And so that's one of the major blockages to making these sometimes very simple and cost-effective steps to getting our dependency off gas. FortisBC is one of the most powerful lobbying voices in the province. So yes, the first step is to stop hooking up new homes to gas, and that'll make a big dent in the managed wind down.
Anjali, thanks for coming. Very good to meet you, and I wonder what you could say about what you have thought about or considered about electoral reform, namely proportional representation. Thank you.
Yes, absolutely. This is a huge piece of the puzzle. For me, my support for pro-rep goes back a long way. And for me, it is part of I'm a democratic socialist. This is a democratic socialist party. and it finds echoes in other democratic socialist movements all around the world. So we're not, we're not starting from scratch, and we're not making it up from scratch. There are so many cool participatory democracies that we can draw lessons from around the world. And so I've always felt that for real transformative action, you need the most robust democracy. And that's not what we have right now. And so actually to bring about so many of these sweeping changes that we so desperately need, yes, you need strong leadership. And then you need strong leadership at all levels of government. But you also need a functioning, healthy democracy that's actually representative. So I'm very much in favor of pro-rep. I was so excited in 2018 and then so disappointed in 2018. I know that that's been a promise that's been made by so many decision makers that's then promptly being ignored after getting into power. And I know it's not easy to bring something like that about, but it's certainly something that I see as a huge impediment to some of the biggest changes that we need. And another note on that idea of robust democracies, this is really in keeping with my career as an activist and advocate. I really see parties and social movements needing to work together to create the democracy that we actually want. And so, a lot of the most progressive changes that we've seen in other countries have been made, and here as well, have been made because movements were pushing from the ground. Those changes would never have come from government itself. And so I want to see that formalized into a decision-making structure. I want to see a citizen assembly structure where decision-making is decentralized, where policy ideas are coming from the grassroots through citizen assemblies. And that is another part of enriching democracy as well. Another huge part of enriching democracy is allowing young people to vote. It's about time. I mean, look at this generation. They know more, and they understand the climate issue with a degree of nuance that surpasses almost anyone I know in government. And so lowering the voting age to 16 at least is a really huge part of that as well.
Awesome, thank you. I think we're going to do, we got one more question over here, and just on the voting age thing, friendly reminder, to vote to become a member and to vote in BCNDP leadership race, which is what we're in right now, you have to be only 12 or older, which is really exciting. So tell your friends.
It's a really cool, just on that, it's a really cool democratic opportunity, and you don't have to be a citizen, you can be permanent resident. So permanent residents and citizens 12 and up.
Hi. Wow. So nice to hear you speak. Thank you. I'm Helena. I hear through what you were saying at the beginning that you're feeling and hearing and seeing the connection between earth health and body health and mental health. And I'm wondering if you could speak to what you've seen in terms of how young people's mental health improves when you have climate action in place.
Oh my gosh, that's a beautiful connection that you just named. I think I see climate change as the symptom of the disease. It's not the problem in and of itself. It's a symptom of a much deeper problem. And to actually tackle the roots of this problem and where we went wrong, we have to look to Indigenous leadership and to other ways of knowing, and to different logics, different worldviews that are not the same worldviews that created the system that we're living under, and to look at different ways of relating to each other and to the earth. And we have incredible Indigenous leadership in this province that's been telling us for years and years that our health is connected to the health of the land. And those two things are inextricable. And as the land gets sick, we get sick. And the young people are really feeling that. And there's a lot of Western science that now backs that up as well, that shows that mental health and physical health are determined by so many factors. And so many of those factors are related to the environment around us, all the environments around us, to our community connections. There's so many social determinants of health. And this is, again, some of those intersections where some of the issues that we're seeing in our healthcare system could be minimized or avoided if we were tackling some of these social determinants much earlier, before people start getting sick. And it would reduce some of these heavy costs on a system that's already buckling under the strain. So yeah, thank you for bringing that up. Our health is the health of the planet. Vice versa.
Thank you. That was beautiful.
Thanks, Ben.
Yeah, so I've been told you'll be around until 7:30, which is exciting. So folks, a couple calls to action right now. If you've not already, please get your BCNDP membership. You have until September 3rd. If you don't get it, you can't vote. You're not going to show up. Get it. Tell your friends and family to get it. Tell strangers to get it. Tell your dog to get it. So tell everybody to get it, because you can. If you don't, if you know somebody that might be disaffected by politics, even if they get their membership now, then they have a whole couple months to learn about Anjali and about this campaign. So it's $10. You can donate more if you want. And then the second call to action is this campaign is grassroots, and there's no corporate sponsors. There's no big oil money here, right? And travel doesn't pay for itself. Food doesn't pay for itself. These beautiful materials don't pay for itself. This microphone rental doesn't pay for itself. So the maximum each person can donate is $1,300, and every penny helps, folks. Seriously. So $5 helps. $20 helps, $1,300 really helps. So this is a grassroots campaign, and so I'm kindly asking you folks, think about what you can do to help this campaign, because truly, when we think about climate action and we think about our collective future, there's so much that you can do out here. And when I think about this campaign and this race, where there's tens of thousands of people in this province that are going to be choosing the next premier. This is a huge opportunity for us to make this happen. So your donation goes so far towards that. Signing up members goes so far towards that. Remember, you only have to be 12 years old. 12 years old, folks, you can vote. Yeah, it's great. So, so please, we have a couple iPads over there by Kalina and Jordan. They can get you set up. If you don't have your membership, please go and get your membership. If $10 is a bit much for you, no judgment here. You can actually do it for as little as $1, but normally the minimum is 10 online. So we have some iPads over there, and then please, if you can, a donation goes so far in this situation to get Anjali across the province, talking to the people that need to be talked to for this. So let's give a big last round of applause. Thank you so much.
For this amazing organizing.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
We're going to be around.
Okay. Okay, great. So folks, we're just having a quick interview here. There's buttons and stuff over here. There's also going to be an ecocentric interview on Kootenay Co-op Radio Sunday at 9 a.m. 17-minute long interview, so that's a good thing to check out. Hang around, and Anjali will be available to chat, take some photos after this short interview, and then we're going to play some tunes so you can hang out, relax, check your bank account so you can donate, all that fun stuff.
But you know, I was thinking, you know that guy, Stephen Gilbert, the Minister of Environment.
Where do we give money?
Like
Yeah, over by Kalina. Over by Kalina. Yeah.
Really saying off the East Coast, you know, if it isn't like she said, you know, this is on the board,
Yeah. I'm just going to set up.